Kate Mila, welcome to Psychics and Psychos. This is part one of our close examination of Robert Hansen, and this name probably won't ring a bell. He's not as well known as the description of his crimes is well known. His full name was Robert Christian Boas Hansen, aka the Butcher Baker. So he was a baker and he did some terrible things. So we're going to get into his family background and his crimes and maybe a little of his psychology today. And then next video, we'll be doing a more metaphysical look at his astrological chart and his tarot cards. So Robert Hansen was born on February 15th, 1939 in Estherville, Iowa. His mother's name was Edna, who was totally American, and his father's name was Christian. He was Danish. After a brief stay in California in 1942, so the family moved from Iowa to California at some point very early in his life. In 1949, they moved to Pocahontas, Iowa. He worked for his father. His father had a bakery, and he worked for his father. He was shy, unpopular. He stuttered. He had severe acne. He was a quiet loner, and he had a very difficult relationship with his dominating father. Now, it's interesting. I could find no information about his mother. That leads me to think that she deferred, that she was in the background. More than likely, she stayed home because, that was the trend in those days. And the dominating father, that's a concern. So keep that in the back of your mind. And then his hobbies that he escaped his isolation with: hunting and archery. In 1957, he spent a year in the Army at Fort Polk, Louisiana. He was discharged after a year. That seems unusual, hasty. I really got no details about what happened. I'm going to speculate here, but just keep in mind, this is speculation. I imagine he was odd, and they just didn't think he was a good fit. He went on to work with the police academy in Pocahontas, Iowa as an assistant drill instructor. In 1960, he got married, so he was relatively young, 21. Yeah, he was 21, and he married a younger woman. So what are we talking? Teenager? Shortly after his marriage, December 7th, 1960, he committed arson. He burnt a school bus in the garage of the Pocahontas County bus barn because he was mistreated in high school. He got a 3-year sentence. He did 20 months in the Anamosa State Penitentiary. Only 21, and he's already in the state pen. His wife divorced him. I think it's important to note that this crime that he committed, he admitted himself, was driven by revenge. He's a guy who holds a grudge. While he was in prison, he was diagnosed by the doctors in prison. So these are not my words. This is the psychiatrist from the penitentiary in Iowa. He was diagnosed with manic depression, which today probably we'd call bipolar disorder, with schizophrenic episodes. He was described as having an infantile personality. So he was an immature, impulsive loner with fantasies of revenge and vengeance. He was obsessed with revenge on anyone that he felt wronged him. He held a grudge. He was jailed several times for minor crimes, petty theft, that kind of thing. In 1967, he moved to Anchorage. He had remarried in 1963, and so when he went to Anchorage, he brought himself, and he had 2 children. Which was terrifying. He opened a bakery. He was well liked by his neighbors. He also was popular in the local hunting club. He won prizes for his skills. But there was a dark side to this man. On December of 1971, he was arrested twice. The first time for attempting. He did abduct, and he attempted further assaults on a housewife. I don't know if this was a random person, and she looked at him crooked. No details. And the second time was a all the way carried out violent attack on a sex worker. He made a plea deal. He pled no contest to the assault with the use of a deadly weapon, as a matter of fact. And for the first crime, the abduction, and the charges were dropped for the second crime. Now, this is puzzling to me, but there you go. He got a sentence of 5 years in prison. He only served 6 months. He got out on work release in a halfway house. In 1976, so 5 years after those 2 crimes, within the time period that he should have been still in prison, but he wasn't, he was found guilty of larceny, theft of a chainsaw from Fred Meyer's. He was sent to prison for 5 more years, and he was sentenced to required psychiatric treatment. But the Alaska Supreme Court, in its wisdom, reduced his sentence and released him, wait for it, with time served. This is mind-blowing to me. Okay, I have a difficult discussion here. It's a discussion of what he did and then a list of to whom he did it. And I'm going to be playing coy with some of the terminology for the sake of, the new YouTube standards. So bear with me. I'm not trying to be difficult. Okay, his modus operandi. This is his method of operation. How did he work? What did he do? How did he, he would stalk an intended victim to learn her habits. He would pick her up in a car. So this is somebody who either was on the stroll or who walked back and forth to work or back and forth to school. And it's Alaska, so you might imagine inclement weather. And he would offer them a ride, sometimes forcing them with a weapon, take them to his home, do what you imagine he would do, and then put an end to it, stabbing or shooting. But he did some sex workers, but many teenagers. So we're going to go through this list, and you'll notice that there's some inconsistencies in dates here, like the crime was committed and then it wasn't figured out, or the body wasn't found for decades and decades. But I just am doing a chronological list here of what they knew about, and as you'll find out, they discovered more. So they're not 100% certain, but they think in December 22nd of 1971, he killed Celia Van Zanten. She escaped from him. He kidnapped her, and she escaped from him, but she froze to death because he took her into the wilderness. And her body was not found until December of 2025. So this happened 3 days after he had already assaulted the sex worker for which he was sent to prison. And he denies that this happened, but all indications are he did it. June 13th of 1983, he offered a ride to 17-year-old Cindy Paulson, paid her $200, and when she was in his car, he pulled a weapon. He took her to his home, held her chained by the neck in the basement, did everything you can imagine, took her to the airport. This is where things get pretty interesting. Took her to the airport because he had a small plane. He had his own small plane. And he was going to fly her to a cabin in an area accessible only by plane. But as he was loading his Piper Super Cub, she managed to escape. He chased her, but she flagged down a truck at the airport, and whoever it was dropped her off at a motel. She hid in a room, handcuffed, till the police came. She described Hansen. He denied it. A friend gave him a false alibi. He had a meek demeanor. He wasn't a big guy, and he wasn't, rugged and intimidating looking. He was a weirdo, but he wasn't strong looking. He claimed she was just a disgruntled sex worker and she was extorting more money from him. And he had refused, so she retaliated and cops believed him. That year, there were 3 separate murders. This is from Alaska State Trooper Detective Glenn Floth. Hope I said that right. And he thinks that there's a pattern here. And he talked to John Douglas from the FBI, the profiler who basically invented it. So these 3 separate murders. One woman was found on the side of the road. Her name, they didn't know who she was. They called her Eklutna Annie. The second one, they found her in a gravel pit, Joanna Messina, and the third in a shallow grave, Sherry Morrow. But the profiler came up with this. You got a guy who is an experienced hunter, check, low self-esteem, a history of rejection by women. Now, if you remember, he didn't do well in high school. He had acne. He was awkward. He didn't socialize well. And he harbors vengeance. He kept souvenirs, John Douglas said. So like jewelry, personal possessions. And he might have a stutter, which we know he does. Float looked at the number of suspects, found Hansen, found out he had a plane, and he got a search warrant. October 27th of 1983, they found things hidden in his attic. Weapons, jewelry belonging to victims. They found an aeronautical chart with 37 X's. This was hidden behind his headboard. And of the bodies that they had already, they matched some of the X's on the chart. Then they used the chart. We'll get to what they found. At first, he denied the whole thing. And then when he could no longer, weasel his way out of it, he started to blame the victims to justify what happened to them. Finally, he admitted that he'd been on this spree since 1971, and he started with girls who were young teens, 16 to 19 maybe. Then he ventured into the sex workers. For sure, he physically attacked minimum of 30 and murdered at least 17. And this is between the ages of 16 and 41. They know there are more. They are pretty sure he killed at least 21 people. He was formally charged with the death of 4 of them and the kidnap and assault on a 5th. So he was charged with those 3 murders that we weren't sure about. Eklutna Annie, who was found at the side of the road of the woods, July of 1980. She'd been a topless dancer, possibly a sex worker. They really didn't know. And she had been Aaliyah von Zanten, at the age of 18, was found December 22nd, disappeared December 22nd of 1971. She disappeared walking to the supermarket a few blocks from her house. Like I said, she's 18. This is a different time period. In the 70s, people hitchhiked. He admitted that he would just offer rides to people. She was found in a state park in December of 2025. She had been assaulted and dumped while she was alive and died of exposure. She tried to climb out of the ravine where he dumped her, but she couldn't. She just was lost too much blood. There was an X on the map right there, and he denied it. Megan Emmerich, 17, from Seward, Alaska. She disappeared after leaving boarding school. Actually leaving just the laundry room of the boarding school. She didn't just leave. She disappeared from the laundry room. She didn't take anything with her. She just disappeared. They never found her, but he was there in that area, and he did tell an inmate that he took her by boat to a cabin where he did away with her. Then we have Mary Thill, who was 22, who was dropped off by a friend at a Seward bakery, July 5th of 75. Between 1:30 and 2, she was seen by a friend at a local waterfall near her home. He was in town, and he admitted to another prisoner that he threw her in the bay in that area. Number 5, Joanna Messina, 24. She went out to dinner with him. They went on a date. Then there was a cash transaction for services, but he didn't pay her, and there was some sort of an altercation. He took her to Snow River and did away with her and her dog. Her body was found July 8th, so her body was found... not sure. I didn't write down the date she disappeared, but sometime in the beginning of June, July. Roxanne Eastland, who was also 24, who disappeared June 28th of 1980. She was married. Oh, I'm sorry. You would laugh if you saw my handwriting. She lived at a hotel with her boyfriend. She went out on a date with an unknown man and was never seen again. He admitted to her, told the police he did it. Number 7, Lisa Futrell, who was 41. He met her at her nightclub job, kidnapped her from the job September 6th of 1980, and her body was discovered in 84. Malai Larson, 28, disappeared in 81, and her body was found in the same area as Lisa Futrell's in 84. And I'm not going into all the details about what this location was, but it was way far. It became quite, I don't know how to say it. Lots of evidence, lots of different people there. Shelley Morrow, 23. She went to meet a photographer. She told people, I'm going to meet a photographer. He's going to pay me $300 to do nude pictures. This was November of 81. And she was found in a shallow grave near number 7 and number 8. September of 82, a hunting rifle had been used 3 times, but she had been redressed after. So they know now, they're getting a little clearer picture of what's been going on. Andrea Alteri, 24, was last seen taking a taxi to the mall in December of 81 to meet an unknown guy for a photography shoot and to perform exotic dances. Her necklace was later found in Hansen's house. He admitted that he threatened her with a weapon, and he kidnapped her and blindfolded her and assaulted her, but she was found shot in the same area as number 7, number 8, and number 9. He threw her off a bridge, weighted down. Oh, he did the crime in the same area, and he admitted to this. But then he threw her off a bridge. Her body wasn't found. But he admitted that he did it in the same place. Number 11, Sue Luna, 23 years old, a nightclub patron, offered her $300 for a photography shoot. She met Hansen, May of 82, in a diner parking lot in Anchorage, and he took her to the usual spot and did away with her, and she was found in 84. Hansen said that he made her run into the forest naked and he hunted her. And this is what his MO was. Number 12, Tamara Peterson, 20, dancer at a nightclub, was offered money to pose, wasn't found until he confessed. Her body was in the usual place. It was found in 84. Angela Lynn Federer, 24 years old, last verified seen February of 83. Reported by her boss at the nightclub where she danced, missing in May of 83, found in April of 84 near a small lake. Number 14, Delynn Frey, 22, last seen March of 83. It wasn't reported for a while. There was a good reason for that, and I can't remember. I think she had planned to be away from work, and people thought she was gone where she said she was going, out of town. She was found and then buried by police as a Jane Doe, found in the usual place. And eventually, after he was arrested, she was identified by the jewelry found in his house. Teresa Watson, 22, was last seen in Anchorage in March of 83. Meeting a man, getting paid $300 for 2 hours of company. He abandoned her body by the same lake, but he abandoned it because the ground was too frozen to dig, and she was found about a year later. Paula Golding, the age of 30, in April of 83, she was kidnapped, put on the plane. When it landed, she tried to escape, and he killed her. Her body was found in the usual place, her clothes undamaged. So that tells you something about the airplane trip. Number 17, I can't believe we've already read that many. Number 17, Cindy Paulson, 17 years old. In June of 83, she agreed to trade money for sex. He pulled a weapon, took her home to do what he did. She escaped from the car at the airport while he was loading the plane. The security guard at the airfield, now this is separate from her getting away in a truck. The security guard thought that this guy, what's he doing? This looks weird. He didn't see her, but he said, this looks suspicious. And he got the tags on his truck. Robin Pelkey, 19, her remains were found in April of 84 in the remote lake area where the others were. She was identified by forensic genealogy in 2021. She disappeared from Anchorage in 83. So July of 83, she disappeared. April of 84, she was found. And in 2021, she was identified. That's a very long time for a family to wait for information. He was arrested for assault, theft, kidnapping, weapons offenses, and insurance fraud because he used fraudulently accessed money to buy the plane. He claimed that his house had been broken into and his hunting trophies were stolen. But then, he went to trial for all the murders, and he admitted that after, I don't know, Your Honor, somebody broke in and stole my trophies, but then later I found them in my backyard and I forgot to tell the insurance company. After his arrest, his wife left him, took the children, moved to Arkansas, and became anonymous. After the ballistic matches, he pled guilty to 4 of these cases, but he gave details for a lot of them, as we've mentioned. And he did it willingly in exchange for being sent to federal prison and not having publicity. He didn't want to be in a state pen. I guess he thought the feds had better accommodations, and he didn't want publicity. He had to decipher marks on this aviation map to help them locate many of his victims. He said he let some victims go if they didn't tell the cops, but nobody came forward. He showed them 17 graves, and there were 12 that they didn't know anything about being related to him. These young women were marginalized for a large part. There were other marks on the map that he refused to discuss, so he wasn't going to incriminate himself any more than he had to. He was given 461 years in prison with no parole. He started out in Pennsylvania in a federal prison, but he ended up in Anchorage because of his health. And here's what I think, Anchorage State, Alaska State. Here's what I'm guessing. I have no proof of this, but I think the feds offloaded this dying guy because they didn't want to pay the health care. He died August 21st of 2014 at the age of 75 from natural causes. And I wrote down here, there are tons and tons of shows, movies, episodes about him. There's a short story written in Collier's magazine in 1924 by Richard Connell called The Most Dangerous Game, about a big game hunter who is shipwrecked on an island, and the owner of the island, a guy called General Zaroff, likes to hunt humans. They made a movie of this in 1932 with Joel McCrea and poor Fay Wray, who spent her entire film stardom running away from monsters of one sort or another. So I did a little deeper dive into the psychology of this kind of homicide, the human hunter. These guys are thrill killers. They get a certain amount of euphoria from what they're doing and from the planning, the anticipation. It's addictive. It's like building up to the needle, or building up to throwing the dice. That rush of neurochemicals is addictive. These people suffer narcissistic grandiosity, an inflated sense of their own superiority. They think they hold the power of life and death. They're divine. They're the apex predator. They're entitled to decide somebody's fate. This is the ultimate dominance, and I think that's really interesting because his father was so domineering. They like control over the helpless. They like the power. They manifest symptoms often of what's called either the dark triad or the dark tetrad. Now, either three of these things are taken into consideration. Nowadays, they're more likely to look for all four. So this is a cluster of overlapping personality traits. And when they see these all together in a person, they kind of know what they're working with. And if they see signs that somebody who's perpetrated crimes might have these traits, they kind of know what they're going to be dealing with. So the first is narcissism, and that would be the grandiosity. The second is Machiavellianism, and I think, everyone's heard of Machiavelli, the prince, how to be, a tough guy, authoritarian, and that's the manipulation. The third is psychopathy, and in that regard, they're looking for that lack of empathy. And the fourth is sadism, and that doesn't get talked about enough. This is receiving pleasure from inflicting pain and fear. These people are callous and exploitative. So now the narcissism is excessive admiration of the self, a sense of entitlement and arrogance, a constant need for validation and attention. He never had enough of that because he didn't get it when he was a child. The Machiavellianism, as I said, is a manipulation, but also how to use deceit. And there's an emotional detachment that you're able to detach your emotions. It's not that you don't necessarily have them, but you set them aside in order to achieve personal gain. The ends justify the means. But then you have psychopathy, and they usually don't have much or any empathy, no remorse, and they love the thrill seeking, and they have a great deal of impulsivity. Now, I would say he was actually pretty careful, but planning, but maybe he was also just lucky. And then the fourth is sadism. They enjoy inflicting pain, fear, or exploitation. So common traits here, they can make a great first impression, be magnetic, confident, charming. Ted Bundy, right? Not Hansen. He's not that type. But then he had underlying mental health problems. So that's like besides these personality issues. So tendency to consider things like psychopathy and narcissism, mental illness, but they're personality characteristics, personality traits. Manipulative personality would be somebody who uses gaslighting. Don't believe your lying eyes, triangulation. They like to pit people against each other. Now, who does that? Well, compare to Hitler. Hitler did that. He would hire two people or give two people the same job and have them fight it out. Love bombing. We all know what that is. A lack of accountability, if confronted, they look for what they call DARNO: deny, attack, reverse the victim and the offender, shift the blame, zero, it's DARZO, zero remorse, no guilt. They see relationships just as opportunities for their own gain, either resources, an ego boost, not for the personal connection. So, believe it or not, there are studies about all this behavior, and hunting behavior like this has escalating phases. Who would have known? So the first part of this process for the perpetrator is fantasizing. The killer will spend a lot of time visualizing how it's going to unfold, fixating on a victim profile. And as you'll see when we do the metaphysical work, he was quite proud of himself. He felt like, oh, my plan is so sophisticated and it's worked so well. The next step after fantasizing is stalking. So they're finding a vulnerable target, an easy target. They are being careful to protect their own anonymity, but they like the deception and the power. The next is the deed, the dirty deed. This is the climax, the high, the neurochemical addiction that's being fed. And like every other addiction in the book, the first time's always the best time, and they spend the rest of their career chasing the quality of that first high because subsequent events never match that rush. Then there's a cooling off period, and this has been often referred to as the mask of sanity. They can integrate into society. They'll have a family, they'll have a job, they'll have hobbies, but inside they're planning things. I imagine Dennis Rader was probably a good example of that. People were shocked that he was this ordinary. He wasn't a very nice guy, and he was a weirdo, but he had a mask that he fit in. So how do these predators get created? Well, there's always argument in the world of psychology and psychiatry, so it's up for debate. But they tend to think that they're made, not born. Um, it's how you're treated, how you're raised. But you have to have a genetic predisposition. It's nature versus nurture. It's the inevitable argument. Usually, you need a genetic predisposition and a severe early life trauma. So, what kind of traumas are we talking about? Well, what happens to children who aren't treated properly? Trying to not use the terminology, it's flagged here. There's a high rate of this sort of dysfunctional, toxic childhood in these people, and it desensitizes them to pain and suffering at an early age. They also look for the McDonald triad. Now, this is controversial. For a very long time, it was considered significant and possibly almost diagnostic. I'm not using that in a professional way, but that's the best term I can think of. At least it's an early warning. Now they don't put quite as much emphasis on it because there can be so many other things that bring out one or more of the part of the triad. But just for the sake of letting you know the history of how they looked at it, if they saw a child that had a history of bedwetting, fire starting, and animal cruelty, those were red flags. Another common early life factor is dissociation from reality. Now, this is Hansen for sure. Feeling rejection, feeling loneliness, withdrawing from society. This creates a violent internal fantasy world in which he has absolute control. That's him in a nutshell. The American Psychological, or maybe it's Psychiatric Association, put this all together. I didn't. This is from them by Louis Sussinger, John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. He was a co-investigator with the FBI. He's a forensic psychologist with extensive clinical experience. So this psychological analysis is it's from his publication that he did. So that's everything I have about Robert Hansen, a very sad and scary character. Not the world's most famous one, but he did a lot of terrible things. And look at how many people he killed. I mean, that's quite a record. And there are more. They know there are more. They've got the map. They just couldn't get it out of him, the information. So stay tuned, because in a few days, Denise and I will be doing the next step in the process here. And we're working on the next one after that. Very possibly I'll do a session with Deborah Lupien about this channeling. And keep your eye open. There's all kinds of interesting things happening on my channel. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed, and please convince your large extended family and friends circle, to co-workers, people on the bus, get them to subscribe too. So thank you very much, and I will be back. Slánga foil, sláinte.